We are back, and that is Ralph Tresvant. And that's a great intro. I have turned over musical duties to our man, the athletic attorney, and he stays up on his cuts. Ryan Willett, great to have you back, Ryan.
Appreciate it. Good to be back.
It's tough. I know you had a family situation with your pops, man, and our hearts are out to you and your family, man. And
I appreciate that. It's been a rough year, but
can't thank you enough. So you certainly have given in that accord, and it was always good to have your dad calling in and talking. So pleasant and fond memories for 2014 for Mr. Willett. And we also want to bring in now someone, because this issue just has not gone away. And we're not asking for it to go away, but we wanted to have an opinion from the female perspective on this domestic violence situation. And it's not just an NFL scenario. It's an issue, period. And Pigskin and Pearls, Heather Lloyd sent a letter to Commissioner Goodell and also to the NFL Players Association this past weekend. She's also written another blog article as well about Adrian Peterson. So we want to have her perspective in. I got the fellas in here, but I also wanted to have her perspective. Heather, welcome back to Laying Down the Law.
Thank you, Stephen. It's always nice to be back. We can get a little he said, she said thing going this morning, right?
Well, you know,
it's going to happen.
Well, you know, again, I want to have the discussion with you, and also a gentleman who is no stranger from the criminal defense perspective as well, and a solid multi-year friend of mine who has dealt with, over in the BCS area, a guy with the first name of Johnny, and some other high-profile athletes over there. So I want to get, and we're going to take the next two segments to talk about this. But Heather, because most of it has been male-dominated, I wanted to get the perspective from a woman like yourself that follows NFL football, that loves NFL football, that is not a newcomer to this sport on this level, and get your thoughts about the issue surrounding Ray Rice and just the domestic violence matters at hand.
You know, I actually cannot believe that the Adrian Peterson story came out at the end of, basically at the tail end of last week, when this was all we had talked about, was what this means, how to stop this, how the NFL handled it, how the team handled it. And literally, I feel like that conversation was just starting to quiet down, and we were getting ready to start the weekend and talk about football. And what happened? The Adrian Peterson story pops up, and now we've got a situation involving a player now, and violence, and a child. And when it first happened, all I could keep thinking about was, wow, this is just such a test right now for not just for the NFL, not just for the players, but it's a test for the fans right now. And the issue being, how much are we going to put up with, and what do we do at a certain point? I got a really interesting text message from a friend of mine towards the end of last week saying, what would it take for you to boycott the NFL? And I thought about it for a while. I was like, gosh, that's a really good question. So I texted him back, and at the time I said, I guess continuing to turn a blind eye to all the situations that keep coming up, but they don't really have that option right now. And literally the next day, the Adrian Peterson news came out. So then, of course, I'm sitting around thinking about it longer, going, now we got a kid, And again, it's a different story. The details of it are different, but still, we've got an NFL player involved in violence. And it leaves the fans sitting around thinking, wow, how much more of this are we going to take? And what do we want to see happen going forward? And I don't have the answers to that. The answers I have for me personally are, yes, I'm watching football today. I'm writing a story that I'll publish shortly here about me, my relationship with the NFL, and why I stayed. And my issue is basically, I love football. I have a lot invested in football, and I care too much to turn around and walk away from football, which is interesting because that's a lot of women in relationships right now are saying the same thing about their personal lives. But I believe we can change the culture of football. But you know what? It is not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long, involved thing, and you're going to have to get all the parties involved in this and be invested in this. The thing that I wrote in the letter to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell the thing that encourages me in all of this, really, and that was the focus of my letter to both him and the NFL Players Union, is that I liked it that the players stood up at a certain point in the Ray Rice situation once the video was released and said, I'm not going to play with this guy. And these are current NFL players stood up and said, this is crazy, man. This guy shouldn't be playing. And you know what? The minute that happened, I had hope because I thought, you know what? Yes, this is what we need to happen. These guys need to stand up and say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to act like this. You can fine the players. You can suspend the players. But the reality is, I don't think anything scares them more, people who play on a team, than being shunned by their teammates. So there's hope there. And you know what? We take that and we move forward. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be long, but but that's where I stand. A very long answer to a short question.
No problem. Heather Lloyd, she has a couple of blogs, Pigskin and Pearls and the Blue Mare, where she focuses in on the Indianapolis Colts. She hails out of Indianapolis at present. And, two things, and we've had a lot of discussion. You're sitting in here, or we're sitting here talking as former athletes. And I mean, briefly, because I want to introduce Cameron Reynolds as well. The Adrian Peterson one is a little different for us because I believe that, Spencer Conley, Jeff Blake, myself, Dr. Donovan Dixon in here, and he's a medical doctor. He certainly has focused on women's issues, and that has been an interesting perspective. We all had to switch at a minimum. And so we don't know if, seriously, this is a cultural thing because black.
And I was getting ready to say that. It goes back to the way you were raised and how you were raised as a person.
Right.
And we all got to switch.
We all got to switch. So, all of our parents would be locked up or charged right now.
When I heard that, I'm like, really?
And we brought in some other information about that, about where the whelps had occurred on the 4-year-old child. So that's A. B, with Ray Rice, I want to turn that over to Jeff when you talk about the players. But let me briefly introduce Cameron Reynolds. Cameron is a longtime friend, licensed attorney, criminal defense attorney, has seen very high-profile players come under scrutiny like this. One, I think this is more societal than just an athlete issue. And two, Cameron, what about having the legal system play out before we all start making people walk off or be suspended from their jobs, or a lot of people, because I know you've seen how the docket is, would be out of work?
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve. I was talking about that the other day. We used to wait a little bit longer and wait on the presumption of innocence to play in there somewhere. It's almost like that's gone now with hitting a button on your phone and finding out information. But, hopefully that'll happen for Adrian Peterson. The facts will come out. Rusty Harden's an excellent lawyer, and he's out in front of that right now, and that's kind of what he's trying to do, is have everybody wait until, he just now got indicted, apparently, and we all know you can indict a ham sandwich. It doesn't take anything to get an indictment, so that's going to play out, and we just, we used to wait on that, not to pick on your Nebraska Cornhuskers, Steve, but, we used to do that when they were in their heyday in Florida State, and it seems like we've gotten away from waiting on the legal system to play out, which kind of bothers me as a criminal defense attorney.
Cameron, do you think that
that's a good point.
Social media, because we can all throw our opinions out there prior to, the docket and different things like that, I think that's playing more and more into maybe what's going on, you see, Cameron?
Absolutely. It's just we're in an information society, and somebody got arrested, and they're losing their job tomorrow. The guy, he drives a truck for, FedEx, whoever it is, UPS, and he's got a family and he's out of a job based on an arrest. And if I get it cleared up a year later, that's a year without pay. So, and I see that all the time, just based solely on an arrest or an indictment.
Right. Well, let's go back to Jeff. Jeff, Heather Lloyd, Pigskin and Pearls, the Blue Mare, made points about having the NFL players kind of police their own internally, part of the National Football League. Your thoughts about how that played in your career with issues such as these?
Well, as players, we definitely try to police our own locker room. We try to hold each other's hand and hold each other accountable for the things that were done not on the football field as well, off the football field. But everybody can't be everywhere all the time, and we can't control what everyone does. And so you can't boycott the NFL for 4 or 5 guys when you got 2,000 other guys that's doing the right thing.
Right, because we could boycott Congress. We could boycott a whole bunch of things because of 4.
I have boycotted Congress. I'm done.
But you're only talking about a handful of guys that's disruptive or have done things that's that should be dealt with outside and let the legal process handle that situation. So if you work for a corporate institution and you were indicted for spanking your child or using the switch on your child, and you hit him in a couple of places you shouldn't have, but like you said, maybe by mistake, and do you get fired from that job? Do you get released with pay? Do you get scrutinized as a person who is militant toward their kids or what? I don't know. But they don't get looked at as the same as we do as players or as entertainers or as athletes. It's blown up 10 times worse.
They're in a high-profile position.
Yes, in a high-profile position. So,
right.
And that's what's interesting, and you're totally right. It is a reflection of society. This is not an NFL problem. This is not a sports problem. They are reflecting society. What's hard about it is, you see CEOs that get fired for having an affair. The issue really comes down to who you work for and who they want representing their image, and really with athletes, let's face it too, some of it is not even about the NFL, it's the sponsors too. You got to throw that in there too, because literally, even if they don't want to be role models, even if they don't want to be held to a higher standard, the reality is they are, and their sponsors are going to demand that of them. So it's, that also makes it more complicated.
Absolutely. Spencer, you wanted to chime in here.
Yeah, one, this is a very sensitive issue. And I'm just about information. Number one, a lot of people look at this totally different. And I promise you, the majority of Black America heard that information like, oh, well, we all got whooped. So not just is it, how other people look at it, there's a difference in between the way Black and white America raises their kids. And when you look at some of us at a certain age, we all go, well, let me tell you something. And if it was the way we grew up, Jeff, all of our parents would be indicted or in jail or having this issue.
Multiple times.
I know.
But here, listen, because this is serious.
Yep.
Because this is serious. And then we'll all grow up. Steve has grown up, went to law school, and he will praise his parents until he bury him. So will Jeff, and so will I. And we have no problem with how our family disciplined us because that's how we were raised. Which doesn't necessarily make that okay, but on what this country was founded on says that it's okay. It's a biblical principle. So people who go to church, who worship, who give their money and their time according to how they believe, they're following that structure. The majority of Black America looks at this like a joke. Now, the other thing with domestic violence, and let me tell you something. I just looked it up. 2 to 3 million domestic violence cases in America every year. That was 10 years ago. It's probably doubled. And there's 2,800 jobs in the NFL. So if everybody was whooping their wife, or their girlfriend, it's not even a fraction. If we're going to do something about domestic violence, we don't need to campaign against the NFL. Something just needs to be done, period. And we're talking about something that is small, and then the NFL and Ray Rice become the poster boy of this. But if you're tired of your girlfriends and your wives and your daughters and your nieces and nephews and cousins getting whooped, do something about it. Stop trying to, because what we're doing is we're looking at the cause and not the effect. We're looking at the effect and not the cause. We need to deal with the cause, which is it's a problem in America. 2 to 3 million. 10 years ago. It has to be a larger number now, and just something needs to be done across the board about domestic violence.
Just for housekeeping's sake, we're going to keep Heather and Cameron through the break. We're going to take the 10 o'clock hour as well to 10:15. We're going to move the AAU focus on youth sports to 10:15 along with our fantasy segment so that we can keep this discussion going. But certainly I want to hear more from Heather. I want to hear more from Cameron, and I know Ryan wants to chime in as well, and we do. Just if we can get to him, Dr. Donovan Dixon has also dealt with issues where his practice deals with women's issues, and he's seen the results of the violence and whatnot, and has comments as well. This one is, I wish we had the 3 hours instead of the 2 because of the NFL, but it's the NFL that's brought this issue to the forefront.
And the NFL's response to the Ray Rice situation.
Yes, because offline I had some thoughts about that. And, Heather, I mentioned this to you. I'm not going to shy away from it. Hope Solo has a situation, too, where she has been accused of man and woman, a minor youngster and her sister, and the soccer world has chosen to have her get her record-breaking opportunity and has not disciplined her at all. So all this,
and I hold soccer responsible for that. They need to make their own decision.
All right,
She's not exempt, not in any way.
Well, let's do this. Hour 1 in the books. We're coming right back with everybody right here on Laying Down Law. Back, hour number 2, and no one has gone anywhere. Cameron Reynolds, longtime friend and criminal defense attorney, and Heather Lloyd, the beautiful one from Pigskin and Pearls and the Blue Mare. We're talking about issues, clearly not just in the NFL, but highlighted by the NFL and major sports, college football. Thanks for hanging with us through the break. We had a lively discussion through the commercials. And we want to get back. Heather, we've made the point here, one, with Adrian Peterson, which is the most recent, that probably is somewhat cultural. And then with the point of Ray Rice, Spencer Conley said, hey, look, there's millions of these cases. Why do we just choose one guy who, fortunately or unfortunately, has a job that you see him? Because does that make the woman who guy doesn't get seen a better or less of a person? And then, what about Hope Solo? She's a athletic, sizable woman. She hits not her husband, her own flesh and blood and sister and nephew, and knocks him pretty well for a loop.
And she has a history because she did hit her husband when he was a fiance in the past.
Right. And no retribution by the United States soccer.
I'm hearing of this.
Oh, no. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And so you pick and choose in what's going on. And Heather, you and I spoke, having the Republican, or not the Republican, but the senatorial women, most, yes, were Republican, but both 2 Democratic senators sending a letter to Roger Goodell. What about the fact that there's 19,000 cases in the armed services of domestic violence cases annually? That's a lot more than, players in the NFL by a factor of 6 or 7. And they write the letter to a popular sport commissioner and not to their own Joint Chiefs of Staff, which they have primary authority over. So I think this is a very interesting situation all the way around. Yes, it needs to be stopped. However, are people just jumping on this because the NFL is very popular and in our faces every weekend?
Like I said, it's complicated because, first of all, and you're right, the Hope Solo thing, soccer needs to decide what they're going to do on that, but I would hold her to the same standard that we hold everyone else to. She needs, clearly, I would say she's probably got a substance abuse problem. I actually think she might need a vacation from people in general, and I think she clearly has issues with her family, so she needs to work that stuff out, and whatever soccer decides to do, I would support. The NFL even has that going on internally right now, though, with the fact that Greg Harvey's playing today.
Right, absolutely.
The Vikings chose to handle this one way. The Ravens chose to handle it one way, and and the Panthers have chosen to wait until this plays out legally, which you can do that. And like we were saying earlier, the fact that we make rushes to judgment on this stuff because the information is so instantaneous and we get it so fast and all that. Well, that that means that if we do wait to let the thing play out in court, we might be waiting for 6, 7, 8 months, maybe throughout the entire season. And at a certain level, with some of these incidents, the public doesn't have a tolerance for that. And that's what's really difficult. But I agree.
Here's the thing, though, Heather, and I want to talk to Cameron about this. We have a judicial system. We also have a policy in the NFL. As I mentioned, had the games been moved from 2 to 6 as the policy was implemented, then I don't know if the commissioner has the issue. But when he goes indefinitely only because of the tape, I think he didn't get behind the policy that was established. Now, Cameron, I want to ask two things. One, what's wrong with letting the judicial system play out before we start suspending people and taking them off their jobs? And two, what's wrong with following the policy that gets established so that everybody across the board is treated equally if they do a wrong?
Absolutely nothing. That, and I was just looking. I watched some roundtable this morning on the ESPN with Coach Ditka, Keyshawn, and all those guys. Chris Carter pointed out that there was an Alabama federal judge who was charged with domestic violence against his wife, and guess what? He's being paid his $200,000 right now, and they're letting the process play out, and that's a judge. So, my thing is, why can't we do it with athletes, entertainers? If we're going to do it with a federal judge, why can't we do it with everybody else?
And I think absolutely a judge has to be a role model too in his own community. I around town here in Austin, I know the judges and in San Antonio, I would think that they're somewhat role model-ish, And then the second question about the commissioner, Cameron, if he just says, okay, look, now we just implemented a policy, says 6 games, I know I gave you 2. If you just move it up to 6 games, it doesn't matter what the tape shows, he's following his policy, right?
He'd be in better shape, and he'd be having a lot better week than he's having this week. Boy, it has not been a good week for Roger Goodell, and he's feeling the heat with his indecisiveness and the video. Did he have it? Did he not have it? It's hard to tell. He's changed his story a few times, and I bet he's just wanting this to be over with. One thing y'all were touching on a while ago that makes the world go round is the almighty dollar bill. And watching a little ESPN this morning as well, the experts seem to think that he has not handled this very well, and I don't know who could argue for Roger Goodell right now, but revenue in the NFL is at an all-time high, and the power owners are behind him as he's making them more and more money, and he's probably going to weather the storm, but he should have followed the policy, just like you said, Steve.
Absolutely. And the final thing, because people asked about the prosecutor has that discretion in how they charge people, correct?
Absolutely. That was not an unusual deal for Ray Rice at all, and he got pretty much what a first-time offender is. I mean, it obviously the video was horrible, and nobody's defending Ray Rice on that, but the punishment he received was pretty similar to what most first-time offenders are going to get. So you'd hope he'd learn from that and never have it happen again.
Right, because the docket is full of these of these issues and matters, and if we started using the same standard on everybody, and maybe, if people came out and just said life's not fair, athletes get X, ordinary people get Y, lawyers and doctors get, A, and these people who are in Congress get B, maybe if we were honest about society in that way, we wouldn't all feel bad, because I think what we're trying to do, Heather Lloyd, is make everybody equal in their responsibilities, and life just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. And, here's the other thing, too, that you have to keep in perspective is just society and culture in general changes. I get that. Listen, I grew up in white suburban America. My mother used a wooden spoon on me. It wasn't a switch, but it was a wooden spoon, I mean, the difference is it didn't leave marks. I wasn't scarred from it, I mean, I think going forward, you have to look at it as this. Henry VIII, when he got tired of his wives, he had them killed. Okay, we don't do that anymore. That's not acceptable anymore. How you treat your wife, our standards for that have changed dramatically. Even how you discipline your kids has changed dramatically. Society evolves, and listen, when the country started, like I said, owning other human beings was all right. You know, I think going forward as a society, the fact that we're talking about these things is good. The fact that the discussion is happening on a national stage like it is and in the bright spotlights of ESPN and everywhere else is a good thing for every one of these cases. And hopefully it does help the woman at home who no one is talking about her. No one's talking about what her husband's doing to her. Hopefully having this up, in the bright lights that it's in right now does help those people down the road.